Hi, I'm Jessica Beha, and I am one of the prevention education specialists for Great Rivers Regional System for Addiction Care. And we are in the process of doing a series called This Is My Story. And today we are talking with Lori. Lori is a family member of someone who is currently in recovery, and she is going to tell her story. Lori and I met at church and has become one of my really good friends. I love Lori to death. She has such a heart and such a passion for working with individuals in recovery. And Lori is going to tell you her story. So, Lori, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. I always want to share it anytime possible. The short version is, Brooke was raised with me. I was a single parent most of her life. So her father was kind of in and out, but she was raised in church. She wasn't raised around alcohol or drugs or anything like that. And she was someone that I never would have thought would have gotten involved with drugs. Of course, that's usually the way it happens. It's the people that you don't think. So I always say that addiction is not, it doesn't matter what your economic status is. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, it's anybody can become subject to addiction, but she struggled with her self-esteem and tried to find her identity a lot of times through men. She kind of had a man addiction is what I call it. But she graduated from high school, was doing well. We got her a car and, I thought everything was pretty good. But come to find out, 2 months after she graduated, she ended up getting pregnant by a guy that I hadn't even met yet. And so he went out of the picture for a while during the pregnancy. And, I was like, okay, we can do this. We'll get through this. And she was just 18. And then he came back into the picture when Brody was born. And when Brody was born, he was early. And Brody was in the NICU for a while. And he was born with cystic fibrosis, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a disease. It's not just a lung disease. People call it a lung disease, but it impacts your digestive system, your sinuses. It's a serious lifelong disease that requires a lot of medical attention. And so here she was, this young girl, not knowing what to do with this baby with a medical disease, and going to this CF doctor, and they're giving you a list and list of things that you have to do with this child. And so they stayed at my house for a while, her and the boyfriend, and that didn't work out so well. And so she ended up getting angry with me because I told him that he needed to get off the couch and go get a job, and he didn't like that very well. So she ended up leaving and going and living with him. Well, I was clueless. I really had never been around anybody that had done drugs. I didn't really know, but she took the baby. And so I was worried because I would get Brody a lot. Usually every weekend I would get him at least for 3 days. And so I just started seeing some signs, and he was in the hospital. He was born in March, and he was in the hospital in July, very, very sick. And that's when I first got a clue that something was going on. And Brooke had postpartum depression, and, they weren't at the hospital a lot. It was me and the grandfather kind of sharing, taking turns. And Brooke and Isaac would come to the hospital, and they'd be like so tired they couldn't stay awake. And I'm like, why are you tired? You're like 18. Like, I'm an old woman, and here I am staying on at the hospital. And so, and then I would remember they would go in the bathroom, and they'd come out, and they'd be bouncing off the walls. So I thought something is not right. And I became suspicious, and I reported it to the doctor, and the doctor reported it to the social worker who interviewed. I was like, oh, they're fine. Which, it's easy to disguise it for a while because that was just the beginning of it. And so it didn't take long after that until I actually got a hold. Brooke had come to stay at the house, and I got a hold of her phone, and I was able to see it on her phone and see her talking about it. And then I realized, okay, we have a problem. And that was in September. And that's when I went through the process of trying to talk to her, trying to get her to get help, but she was lying and denial. And I was kind of enabling at first, which is what a lot of family members do, because you just don't know what to do. It's your child. And especially when kids are involved, which a lot of times there are kids involved. And, they was asking for money, they needed diapers, or they needed this or that. What are you going to do? I was worried about Brody all the time. The house, they all smoked around him. I mean, he has cystic fibrosis. You don't smoke around people that have cystic fibrosis. And so it was just turmoil. We were fighting. And so I started the process of realizing I was going to have to get custody of him, because I just was seeing her spiral. And I talked to the birth of 3 people because they were like coming and checking on him. And, they were telling me things. People were telling me things. And so I started that process. And then she voluntarily gave him to me in December and said she was going to go into treatment. And I was like, praise the Lord. And so she went to a place in Huntington. I can't even remember the name of it, but it was just a 30-day outpatient thing. But she didn't stay. She stayed 2 days and she left. And so from that point on, I had Brody. And after I got Brody, I think she tried to hold it together somewhat with Brody. And then after I got Brody, it just spiraled downhill. And so it led to the life that drugs leads to. It led to from one drug to another. She never did get to the needle. Praise the Lord. She did get to the needle, but she was hooked on OxyContin, and she did do meth. She tried some various things, but they got into dealing. They were heavily involved with a drug dealer, and they were dealing to get their drugs, which is what a lot of people do. They end up dealing to get their fix. It led to a life of crime. Isaac was on the most wanted all the time. I would be at lunch and somebody would say, did you see Isaac was on the most wanted? They were looking for him because they were stealing. They were just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And so that was 2 years of pure madness. And, got to the point where, and it's what I advise a lot of parents to do, but it's just the hardest thing that you can ever do. But if you want to save their lives, it's what you've got to do, is the tough love. She would call me crying, begging for money. And I'd be like, no. She would come to my house and steal from me. She stole several things from me, and things were things, but she would sell them. It got to the point where I couldn't even buy her anything for Christmas. I couldn't buy her clothes. She'd sell them for money. If I bought her Bath and Body Works, she'd sell it for money. If I'd give her a gas card to give her some gas, she'd sell it for money. So it was just a nightmare. And I had Brody, and Brody was very sick all the time. He was in and out of the hospital. He had surgeries, and it was just and my mom was also very ill at the time. So it was one of the darkest times I ever went through. And it was through that dark time that I totally became dependent on the Lord. I had a different relationship with the Lord. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that. I hope that's okay. But God is what sustained me through all that, because I couldn't have made it through it without it. But it got to the point where I didn't know where she was. I didn't know where she was living. They were living in abandoned houses. I didn't know where she was. It'd be weeks and weeks before I'd hear from her. And she changed phones all the time, which was, I guess, what they do when they deal drugs. They get new phones all the time, I guess, so they can't be traced. I don't understand all that, but she always had a different phone number. So every time I would hear on the news, somebody because they were in the Cross Lanes area, somebody got stabbed or somebody got shot, or I would always be trying to get a hold of her because I was trying to find out whether she was dead or alive. So it was hard, but I had to completely shut her off. She came home twice. The last year before she got help, she came home twice that year. And both times she would shower, get her belly full, probably steal from me. And then she would leave the next day. And so that wasn't working out either. Every time I would be hopeful that, oh my gosh, she's ready to get help, but she wasn't. But finally, Isaac got in jail for a longer period of time, and she was by herself. She was living in a shed, and she was in debt to the drug dealer. She had got a bunch of drugs to sell, and somebody stole her purse and took the drugs, and it was a large amount. I can't remember the exact dollar amount, and the drug dealer was looking for her because he was going to kill her. So she called me and was crying, and she wanted to come home, and that was when the hardest time I can remember. And I was like, you can't. I said, you can get help, or you can go to a women's shelter, but I can't let you come back in my house. And that was hard. And that's so hard, but it's the best thing I ever did, because that's what saved her life, that and God. And so, she just cried, and she was hungry, and she was, living in a shed. And I was like, my child is living in a shed. And so somehow or another, I ended up connecting with Susie Busby. And I don't know if you've talked to her. She'd be another good person to talk to. She's, Warriors of Hope is a group that she's involved with, but Isaac knew her son. Her son has been through addiction and he was in jail. And so Isaac kept calling me wanting to get through to Brooke and I wouldn't connect them. And so somehow or another, Susie ended up at the time, the day I talked to Brooke, she was like, no, I'm not going to get help. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to a homeless shelter. So the next day she ended up connected with Susie because Isaac had called Susie to put a phone call through and Susie did. And Susie could tell that Brooke was high. She could tell that she was desperate. And so Susie met her at McDonald's, gave her some food and talked to her. And then Susie contacted me and, we got Brooke to agree to go to a medical detox. So she went to Thomas to medical detox, and different people have different thoughts about medical detox versus non-medical detox. Medical detox is not a fun thing. Trust me. Brooke was extremely ill. They gave her a shot, and I wish I'd write this stuff down. She could explain it better than me, but they gave her some kind of shot, and the shot made her deathly ill. I remember the nurse called me saying, she was in the floor like throwing up all night long. It was awful. So I was introduced to the lady who was was getting ready to be the director at Rachel Thaxton of Recovery Point. Recovery Point wasn't open at the time. They were in the process of building it, but it wasn't open. And I had no money. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know. This was all new to me. So I had a friend who introduced me to Rachel, and Rachel, the people at Recovery Point had mirrored this place, Liberty Place in Richmond, Kentucky. And so she had been working with them because Recovery Point was kind of formed and fashioned after their program, which is also a 12-step program, a long-term rehab. It was for women. And so I called Rachel and explained my story. And she's like, well, let me call and see what I can do. So she calls and, I talked to the ladies there and they were like, this was on a Sunday. And they're like, well, we'll get her in, but, we have like a month waiting list. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I had a lot of people praying and we prayed and prayed and prayed. And of course, they wouldn't let Brooke out of the program until she agreed to go somewhere. But they were like wanting to refer to some places that I had not heard the best thing. And I didn't believe that Brooke would do well with outpatient treatment. Some people might, but I believe Brooke needed long-term rehab. So I was just praying, and I had a lot of people praying, and they called me on a Thursday and they said, we have a bed open. Can you get her there tomorrow? And I'm like, yes. So I went and picked her up and, let her take a shower, and she was taking her time. She didn't want to go, but I'm like, no, you're going. So I drove. My son went with me, and we drove 3 hours, and I dropped her off at the doorstep. I didn't know the people. I didn't know the place. I wasn't allowed to walk through the door. Like, they had their gloves on and they went through all of her stuff. And, I dropped her off. I didn't get to talk to her for 6 weeks. She wasn't allowed to call. I mean, Recovery Point is not nearly as strict. I mean, you can go to a meeting, but that's where Brooke needed to be, because if Brooke would have been here, she would have left. I don't think she would have stayed. Recovery Point has so many people that come from all over the state, which I think sometimes it's good to get out of your own environment and get in your element, because she didn't have anybody that would pick her up and she had no way to get home. She had no money. So she stayed there. She was there 7.5 months. And I used to drive Brody. Brody was almost 3. We would drive, we'd get in the car and make that 6-hour round trip, and we would get us there for 2 hours. I drove up there one time and they were on lockdown. And I was like, you're kidding me. I drove 3 hours to visit with her and they're on lockdown, but they let me see her for a little bit. So, but it was through that time that Brooke got to have a relationship with her son, because it was to the point where he thought I was his mommy. He didn't even know who she was. And I have one of the sweetest pictures I have is of him giving her a kiss. She's sitting on a curb and he's kissing her, and I just to get to see them develop a relationship and to watch her change. And I got to know so many of the ladies there, and that's when God poured into my heart that I was meant to minister to women in recovery. And so that's where it started. I was going to a different church then, but it just started with me taking. One time I did cookies, and one time I did bags of candy with letters. There was about 115 women there as well, 115, 120. And just the first time that I took letters, I did it just for Brooke's group, the place that she was in, and there was like 40 of them. And they lined the halls just weeping and just telling me their stories and hugging me. And it was just like, wow. And so many people, being Brooke was blessed, and there are people that are blessed that have support from family, but there's so many of those people that don't. They don't have anybody. They've burned all their bridges. People have given up hope on them. And, you know, that's what they need. They need to know there's hope. They need to know that they can walk away from their old life and walk to a new life and, you know, be forgiven and start something new, but they need support more than anything. So Brooke left there after 7.5 months. She didn't graduate. It was to the point where she was in the final phase of the program, and she either had to go to work there or she had to wait to be a peer mentor. And at the time, my mom was really sick and I had a lot going on. And so I talked to the lady there, and so we felt like she was okay. So she came home and she's been clean. It'll be 5 years in June, I believe. And she's been completely clean. And, you know, she's had a job ever since she got back. You know, she's got 3 kids. She's had 2 more children. It hasn't been easy. Is it easy for her? No. But, and she recently got married in September, and that's a different story. But, you know, we went through a relapse. She was someone who had an addiction problem, and he'll probably be watching this, and I love you, Daniel. But, you know, he had a relapse during this process. So I've kind of walked through it again in a different way, and it's been hard, but he's doing really good. He's at the Rock Ministries now, and he's doing good. And, you know, I believe that God has a plan and a future for them. And I believe that they will end up, you know, being involved in the community and working and doing things to help people. And, you know, Brooke has a heart for it too. So, you know, I'm just grateful. I'm thankful. And if you're a family member and you're walking through it, the best thing you can do, the best advice I can give anybody is don't enable them. Don't give them money. I know it's hard. They'll cry, they'll manipulate, they'll do whatever, but you have to practice tough love. When people call, I've had so many family members reach out to me and I give them advice and they're just not able to do it. But if you're letting them live with you and you're enabling them, and I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm just being honest. If it wasn't for tough love, I mean, I don't think Brooke would be here today. I don't think she would have lived through it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Speaking, just to kind of interject real quick, you're talking about that. And back in January, I think it was, I got to hear a parent speak. And one of the things that she said was that she was literally loving her son to death.
Yes.
And she said that put a whole new kind of meaning on life for her when she said that. And I remember sitting there and I was like, oh my goodness, like that totally kind of, it made me take a step back. But it was just a great reminder too. And just to hear her story and the way she was talking, and even now hearing you talking, I mean, literally, you know, we love you love your children to death, but that puts on a whole new meaning when you have a child that's struggling with a substance use disorder.
Yes. Well, that day when she called me and she's like, you know, I'm hungry. I mean, you know, sorry. You know, knowing that your child's living in a shed, they're hungry and they haven't had a shower. And I mean, that's hard. It's hard, but it was the best thing I ever did. Because if I wouldn't have taken advantage of that opportunity to draw the line and make her realize and make her see, I don't think she would be here today. I think she would have ended up getting killed. The drug dealer was going to kill her. I mean, I ended up having a conversation with him and turning the phone over to the FBI. That's a whole nother story, which they told me I should have talked to him. But I told him, he better forget the number, better forget he ever talked to her. I'm like, you better leave my daughter alone. You don't know who you're messing with. But, you know, it ended my marriage at the time. That's a whole nother story too, which I won't get into the details. But, you know, that, you know, the day she went to rehab was pretty much the day that my marriage ended, because there was some things, you know, my ex was he was her stepfather and he was kind of enabling her, and there were some things that went on that were really bad, and I didn't even know, you know, which I think made Brooke's addiction even worse. So I felt really bad about that, but I didn't know. I did not know things that were going on. So, but, you know, I think Brooke would tell you that she's grateful for me being tough. And that's just, you got to be tough, and it's so hard. I mean, I've heard stories from other parents too that are like, you know, my kid called me and they were hungry. I mean, I wouldn't even take her food. I would take her peanut butter crackers and water. Like there's times where I'd take her boxes of stuff, but I was very careful about what I took her, because I knew she had to suffer. She had to get to that bottom. She had to get to that rock bottom to get back where she is. And God, people were praying, and God was gracious. And she also had charges. I'll tell you this, and then I'll wrap up. But she had charges against her, which a lot of the girls do. That's why it's hard for them to find jobs, or guys too. That it's hard for them to find jobs and find employment because they have felonies and list of charges. And God does forgive us, but He still, we still have to pay the consequences for our actions. And so she had 3 charges against her. She had robbed this girl and some things. And so when she was at Liberty Place, she had to come down one day and go to court. And she was nervous Nelly. I couldn't afford an attorney because I lost my house. I mean, I lost everything through the divorce. And so, I was like, oh, so we had a public, defender person that was taking care of us. And I wasn't real confident in him, but, we were talking and we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And I'm just there. I'm worshiping and I'm singing and I'm, just waiting it out. And Brooke's nervous. And all of a sudden the girl that she had charges against her showed up, and Brooke was scared to death. And Brooke's like, oh my gosh, there she is, Mom, there she is. And, they didn't talk, but they, had looks. And so we were waiting and we kept waiting. What is going on? What in the world is going on? What's taking so long? And so the guy came over, he says, the judge is calling us back, or, I'll be back in a minute. And so they went behind closed doors, and he came back probably 10 minutes later and said, she saw Brooke. We told her that Brooke was in rehab and Brooke was in treatment. And so she said, I can tell that she's not the same person anymore. So I'm dropping all the charges. So slate clean. She got a total second chance because she would have had charges on her record too. So that was awesome. That's grace. Grace.
Well, Lori, really quick before we wrap up, one of the things that you touched on was that while Brooke was at the treatment facility in Kentucky, you had somebody ask you, well, you didn't tell the story, but I've heard you tell the story, but you had somebody ask you about your hair. I'm pretty sure it was there, right?
Okay, that was at Recovery Point.
Recovery Point. Okay, but so when Brooke was there, though, you started to kind of develop this passion for working with women in recovery. And now you've actually started your own 501c3, your own nonprofit, which is called Recovery Warriors. So do you care to tell us just really quickly, about what Recovery Warriors does and how it came about and the partnership that you all have right now with Recovery Point?
Yes. So like I said, I got to know the women there and realized that it was my calling to work with women in recovery. I just knew it, like that's my passion. So I connected with Rachel Thaxton again because Recovery Point was getting ready. Was it just a few months after Brooke came back that Recovery Point opened? And so I said, man, I want to be a part of this. I want to do stuff. I want to help. So I went there. I did something on Christmas. Like they opened in October, and on Christmas I did letters and candy. And then I went in February after that and to share my testimony. And the church I was going to at the time got recovery Bibles for all the girls there. There was like 56 girls there at the time. And a girl that was sitting in the audience, she said, I love your hair. And by the way, my hair don't look too good because of COVID-19 right now. But she was like, I love your hair. I was like, oh, thanks. And she asked me who did it. And then I started looking around the room and I was like, who does y'all's hair? And she was like, we don't get our hair done. We're not allowed to cut each other's hair. And you could tell, I mean, their hair didn't look too good. So that's when I started getting inspired. The first thing I wanted to do there was a beauty day. And so it wasn't just a few months, like 2 months after that, I did the first beauty day, and we've had 4 now. And so I got hairdressers to come in and volunteer their time to cut their hair. And we fed them. We gave them, like, each person got a basket of products. And I don't think we did nails the first time. I think it was the second time we did nails. And so every year we've done that. So, and I would go periodically, but I wasn't really connected with Recovery Warriors and had a group of people. So then I started going to Southridge Church. It's been almost 3 years ago now, 2.5 years ago. And so when I started going there, people found out some things I was doing and they wanted to get connected. And so I got connected with Southridge Church. And so that led to us driving vans and bringing the girls in, which led to later we have a special class on Sundays at 9:00 for the ladies. And we do activities every month there. And we do a beauty day once a year because it's a big, huge event. You were there, you know how big it was. I mean, we had a clothing boutique this time. We have massage therapists. We do their nails. We give them a whole big bag of products because they are grant funded, you know, and the people there don't have, you know, it doesn't cost anything. It's free for anybody that wants to go there. So, you know, now we are very intricately connected with Recovery Point, the one in Charleston for ladies. I mean, there's men's facilities too, but I'm connected to the women. So, you know, that inspired me and this group of people that helped me to be like, hey, we need to do a 501c so we can, you know, build funds and help to have funds to be able to do these things. And since like COVID, we bought the whole house donuts once. We've bought them coloring books and markers. I mean, we do movie night pizza. We do craft days, breakfast. I mean, we do all kinds of things with them, and we just love them. We do a card ministry. You're a part of that, you know, every week. And that's something that the ladies love. I mean, they love getting cards of encouragement or letters. So any kind of encouragement that you can give these people. I mean, I've had women come up to me and say, you know, I was thinking about leaving, but I got your card and I didn't leave because I got your card. Or, you know, we came there for a movie. I can't tell you how many women, Heather Shaw was one of them, that was getting ready to leave. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, I didn't leave because you came tonight. So, you know, people talk about addiction and it impacts. I don't think anybody that's not impacted at some point by somebody that they know. They know somebody that's going through addiction. And we talk about it, but what are you doing? I mean, you're doing things. So what are you doing to make a difference? And that's what I think it takes. And you can make a difference by, if you don't feel like, hey, I don't feel like being hands-on, you know, there's lots of ways to contribute outside of being heavily involved. So that's where we are, and it's growing. I mean, I have dreams and prayers. I would like to open up my own sober living home if that's God's will, but that's a prayer. Hasn't happened yet, but that's his
Lori,
will.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to tell us not just your story, but the story of your family and the story of how you are being used now in the recovery community. I know that there are many women out there who absolutely love you to death, and you are a part of their story. And so if anybody would like to get in contact with Lori or has any questions about Recovery Warriors, or maybe you're a family member, maybe you're a parent and you have a child that is going through addiction or struggling with a substance use disorder or is in recovery and you want someone to speak with, contact us at Great Rivers. We can definitely get you in contact with Lori. And then also Beauty Day is going to be coming up in November. And so if you're interested in being a part of Beauty Day, you do not have to attend the Southridge Church in order to be a part of Beauty Day. It is an amazing time. I got to participate in Beauty Day this past year. Like Lori said, there was a clothing boutique. There were nails. They were getting their nails done. There was a photo booth. We had a dance party that broke out. And so it was just a really great time. So if you're interested in possibly being a part of Beauty Day this year, please reach out to us and we can make sure that we get you connected with Lori as well. So again, Lori, thank you so much for telling your story. And we look forward to hearing many more stories as we continue in this series.
Thank you.